Welcome to In the Know with Blegay, where we explore issues that impact our community. And this month, October, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And this is important because many of us know someone somewhere who has experienced domestic violence, whether they've been harmed physically, mentally, they've been a victim. And we've always asked ourselves, how do we help them? Now, we know in 1994, Congress passed the Violence Against Women Act, and that allowed for prosecution all across the country to protect women in domestic violence issues, sexual assault, and this actually opened up a door where there was laws passed throughout all jurisdictions from local to state to protect those who have experienced domestic violence. And at that time there was a focus on women, and we know today that men also are victims of domestic violence. But we must ask ourselves, what has been done to protect those victims? Because we still know so many victims today. We're looking at almost 30 years ago, a bill was passed, and today we still see victims everywhere. What has been going on, and what could be done to make a difference to increase the protection? I'm going to be talking with Ms. Lynn Strange, a victims advocate in domestic violence, who talks about the need for a process to protect those who have been victims. When a victim has to leave their home, they don't feel safe in their home. Many of them feel that there's nowhere to go. Even many have argued. Advocates who were formerly victims said that they did not know that there was anything that could help them. So when they leave their home, is there a home that they can go to, a safe house? Are there financial security that can be set for someone who has to legitimately leave home, maybe leave their kids? Even is there job protection for someone who is going through mental illness or anything impacted by being a victim? So there's a lot of things that need to be in place, and Ms. Strange is going to talk about there needs to be a process in place, and this is on a local level, but up to the state level. States should start looking when funding is going to organizations who are committed to making sure that we address domestic violence. The question should be, how does this help the victim in the process? So we're going to talk to Ms. Strange, who's going to give us a lot of information, and really it's inspiring because her advocacy started with her own experience as a victim of domestic violence. So listen in. Welcome to In the Know with Blegay, and we are here celebrating Domestic Violence Month. And this is really important, as I know many individuals who have suffered from domestic violence, and we have a great advocate here, Ms. Lynn Strange.
I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about the importance of, looking at domestic violence and actually discussing what can we do to make change. So let's talk to an advocate that works with domestic violence survivors every day and actually does other advocacy work to talk about why it's important. So, what's your background? Tell us, why are you dedicated to fighting against domestic violence?
I'm dedicated to fighting against domestic violence because I'm a survivor of a very horrific domestic violence cycle in marriage. And when I was going through that particular cycle, didn't have support, didn't have the resources, knew the challenges, knew the barriers from family, economical, community, legal. And when I got delivered out of that particular relationship, thank God for that, I realized then that I had to take what I didn't have to begin to advocate the need of why these resources and support is needed for victims of domestic violence. And not just in a short-term fashion, but in a long-term, until that individual, that family is able to find themselves in a safe place and have stability long-term to move forward toward wholeness, in a sense, of being free and to regain their life back again.
So can we just talk about a little bit about your personal story?
Sure.
What sort of, you don't have to go into details, but when you say you reached out, looked for resources, how did you do that, and what happened?
Well, one of the ways was legally, going through the judicial process. Mm-hmm. And years ago, of course, laws have changed tremendously now, but back then, domestic violence was a very, I would say, a nonverbal topic. It wasn't something that individuals talked about. Mm-hmm. The legal system was not versed in with understanding of victimization, the victimology aspect, and they didn't really understand the seriousness when a woman or a man, back then was more women-oriented type of issue, would come and seek help. So things were minimized, things weren't taken as serious. So women were being put back into those volatile situations, either from denial of the protective order, or if the woman did come and say the individual violated, it more or less was an issue where women were blamed for being in those type of relationships.
Interesting. And so, today, how has things changed from when you were a victim and now that you're an advocate? How have you seen the change?
I would see the change, if I put it on a 100% scale, at least a good 40%. Would I have say, am I able to say a whole 60, almost 100%? No. I have seen the awareness. And unfortunately, the awareness came about because we had more incidents of murder and harm to victims. I have seen laws change where they've been a little bit tougher in terms of accountability, being sentenced, being held accountable. I have seen domestic violence cases now being marked in the legal system so that if there's a repeat offender of that same type of crime, then at least we know it's domestic related, and hopefully then the penalty or the accountability is higher more judicially. But really, I think that we still have that significant barrier of how do we really provide long-term support to victims of domestic violence? Do we really understand what they're going through? Why do they stay? Why do we help them and they go back? What can we do to really get everyone on board regarding this issue?
And so let me just go, you work with you're a victim advocate, and what are some of the common things that you see that concerns you? And what are some of the common things that you see?
Some of the common things I see are the lack of still understanding. Why don't they leave? I see that there's not enough resources. We can assist victims temporarily. We can get them out 28 hours, 40 hours, 3-day hotel stay, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, shelter stay. We still don't have the long-term supports that will make that woman or that male, whomever who's victimized, not return back to the pattern. Not putting them back in greater lethality that they were in.
Why do they go back?
Various reasons. Women really still have the intimate fear feeling, the psychological abuse that took place. I'm going to kill you, some women believe it. Lack of financial, economic stability, nowhere to go. And to me, there's some passivity legally that if I can walk in a courtroom, say he abused me and he has probation or anger management, why should I report again?
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying? It causes a lot of, it has to be a holistic, and I hate to, seem like it's a health issue, but in a sense it is because of the detriment it causes, but it has to be a holistic approach. Legal, police, nonprofit, churches even involved. We have to look at this in a greater regard of how do we maintain resources and support to victims of domestic violence.
And so what about, many people say that many of the cases, I know you're not a lawyer, but
Right.
You've seen these cases, that many victims don't win or they can't move forward with a lot of cases because of, just sort of juries are finding with domestic violence. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I think what's happening in our legal system is the awareness, the understanding of why do victims stay, why do they go back. It's a judgment. So sometimes there needs to be more training. I would say judicially from the bench. So from the bench to the community. From the community to the bench.
Even judges aren't getting it right.
Exactly. We have to look at this and really take a greater regard and understanding of why are we seeing victim A 20 times? Why is victim A reporting, maybe not coming? What are the barriers? What is causing this type of cycle even in the legal system?
Right. And so have you seen, we've seen the cases where someone has been killed or severely harmed. And when you see those, what goes through your mind? What are you thinking about, or how are you thinking that we could do better to support that person so we could avoid it?
It's a twofold. There are instances where we can do everything that we think or believe that we've done. And a lot of times some of your murders are your silent victims, victims that have never approached the legal system, never approached maybe prosecution aspect of filing charges. Sometimes they're silent murders. And then sometimes they're murders where they have approached the court and maybe not come back to navigate the resource for whatever reason. Fear, maybe not think anything's going to happen. It's kind of a mixed type of response and cause in terms of or what you see manifestation of those particular murders.
Okay. So let's go through the process because I think people should understand. If somebody's going through domestic violence from your stance and they need to get out of the house, if they live, let's just say we're in Prince George's County, if they live here, what could they do? Where could they go?
But actually, I mean, first, initially, if they're in that intimate type of volatile situation, you know, call 911. That seems simplistic,
Right.
okay? And then if it's something where the batter's not there, the police response to the home, then of course they would go file for a protective order.
Okay.
A protective order would hopefully provide them that immediate relief. If it's on the weekend, it's an interim order. Then that Monday, they would be in court getting the temporary, then coming back a week later, hopefully to acquire the final protective order. We do have that one shelter, the Family Crisis Center. I'm not sure as to what is really entailing with that as far as long-term support. I understand now it's not a long-term stay, it's a 14-day stay. And then we have the 311 number, but it's still, from my understanding, working with victims off work site, more in the community, there's still a lot of barriers that are still existing.
So what are the solutions? I think that's what people are asking now. Like we have, as you all have heard, we have a case where we have a lot of domestic violence survivors that have nowhere to go. That what are the resources if they are abused, and what do they do afterwards? So what are some of the solutions? We can talk. I mean, you probably
Sure.
thought of something, but on the other hand, you know, maybe we can go broadly.
I think that we have to advocate legislation with understanding this, the really need, taking our concerns to Annapolis and saying, look, especially by being in the state of Maryland, this is serious. Resources should not be given to the same partners or places where you
Right.
see that there's no change.
Right.
We have to now look at, and for other providers, for other organizations, who can we release these fundings to make sure that the constituents in the community or these victims are served. We have to really advocate legislation and accountability of funding to make sure we don't have situations such as the Family Crisis Center. Victims in a place of safety but being re-victimized based on neglect issues where we've put our taxpayers' money into a shelter only to find these women are either freezing with their children, molded food, rat infestation, mold, and getting injured in a very place where they're already coming from a physical, emotional injury, looking for safety and being re-victimized that way. So I think that we have to be honest with ourselves and realize that we can no longer have the good old boy system. We can no longer scratch each other's back. We have to really say, if you're not providing the service, we're not going to provide the funding. If you're not going to adhere and do what our expectation is with these monies to really help meet the need that would prevent the lethality. Because if I feel as a victim I'm not going to have support, I'm going to go right back to the batter who's already convincing me he's the only one that cares about me, he's the only one that loves me, and if the system proves to me that that's true, I'm going to believe him. I'll take my chances. And that's what's happening. We must make change down in Annapolis consistently and keep the issue of domestic violence on the radar outside of just October, just like the Susie G. Komen. There was a mission in the heart of that family member to say, listen, breast cancer is serious and we have to be global with this and understand that this is something that's killing people. The same thing with domestic violence.
And do you think from a national level this is something that there needs to be guidance on a national level on this issue? Because I think what gets to me is I'm turning on the news, reading. You've even worked with some of the
Yes.
victims that I've seen where I'm
Yes.
just like, this person's going through this. What is going on? So do you think that there needs to be a sort of commission to give guide to local states about like, okay, so this is what needs to be done, 1, 2, and 3? Because there is a lot of funding going out for domestic violence,
There's a lot
right?
of funding.
And then we're still having people get hurt.
I think that we must take it nationally. If we bring the national attention, then hopefully it will filter down to the state and local attention. But I think that we should be very persistent, such as Dr. Ford, in what our beliefs are and what we know about the issue of domestic violence and what we've seen the impact, and stay in the forefront of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, stay in the forefront of Capitol Hill by going down, asking for congressional hearings and advocating and making our voice resound, not remain silent. If we remain silent, then we allow the pervasion of such epidemic, such systemic issue that truly is not being addressed. Now, some will say, is that the cure-all? You know, you can't save everyone. Well, we have to at least know that we've tried and done our due diligence and that we are staying consistent and remaining. Susie G. Komen knows that maybe everyone is not going to survive from breast cancer, but I'm going to do enough that I can as an organization to make the awareness, to provide the resources, and to give the support. Without that, we have failed. Many victims, many who are still being victimized, and many who have died trying to get out.
So we're just closing out. Do you have a story that you want to tell us about, any any instance in your career as an advocate that you have sat down and said, I am glad and I thank God for what I do?
Yes, there are some victims that I have encountered professionally and outside of the professional arena that I can look back and say, through their also commenting and coming, that I thank God for saving my life to be able to pour back to them and encourage them and to know that there's hope, and then guide them to the resources that I know, that I hope that would be able to serve them effectively and save their lives. And so when I see that they're living and thriving, it does make me feel good to know that this one family is being saved, in the hopes that that will begin to just spread her survival, her overcoming to the next one.
All right. Well, thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. Thank you.
And as you heard it, it's time that we look at legislation that can truly help a holistic view for our survivors. So in this domestic violence month, let's think about that. Ask your representative about it. Call someone about it. And spread the word out there, because it's awareness, right?
It's awareness.
It's awareness that's made
awareness.
the change. And just like Susie did, the Coleman with breast cancer, we should do the same thing with domestic violence. Get the word out there. Let people know this is something really important.
Yes.
And if they don't look at it, we're going to have more people dying. And they need to be protected. The resources should come so that they can leave their house and, heal.
And heal.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in for In the Know.